All right, Dr. Pompa here, probably a minute or two early because we are bringing a guest on, Dr. Jason Fung. So very excited about that. I'm going to say this probably a couple times. My regular teaching, where I'm talking about diet variation, feast-famine cycles, a very important part of maximizing your results in the fast. That's going to be tomorrow night at this exact time tomorrow night. So putting out an announcement now that my regular teaching, reason because I want tonight for you to get all of Dr. Jason Fung, who by the way is going to be speaking at my seminar November 2nd through the 4th in Las Vegas. We love Jason Fung. My doctors love Jason Fung. We have been able to incorporate much of his research into what we do. It's one thing looking at something in a laboratory, it's another thing actually being able to implement some of these strategies. And we're going to talk about some of that tonight. So Dr. Jason, if you're watching, just, obviously come on and my son Isaac will invite you. But anyways, we are going to be busting the myths about fasting tonight. Let me throw a few out there, right? Hey, I'm going to lose muscle during my fast, so I don't want to fast. Well, the guy actually working the camera there will tell you he actually gained muscle. That's my son Isaac. But it does take a month before you actually gain quality muscle back. So that's where we're going to bust that myth. What about the myth of it's a yo-yo diet, right? You lose weight, then you put more back on because it ruins your metabolism. Well, we're going to make sure we bust that myth down as well. And look, there's a lot of myths that I want Jason to bust. And I'm going to ask, I put it in the title here because I want to ask him the question about glucose because we get it all the time. Why isn't my glucose dropping? And I'll tell you, it is very important for glucose to drop. I want Dr. Jason to explain that. Matter of fact, one of the things is if we don't get glucose to drop, we don't benefit from the ketones, we don't get the autophagy to the level that we want to get. So we want glucose to drop. Now, Dr. Jason studies this in diabetics, and I can tell you he believes that the only real way to fix this problem, this glucose problem, is fasting it out, the fat out of these organs. And by the way, he'll talk a little bit about that because he has a really different view of diabetes that most people do. We think of diabetes as just being perhaps resistant to insulin, but it's much more complicated than that. It is how our body pushes the glucose away from the body into the organs and the cells, into the tissues, and there starts the damage. So we're going to ask him that. Okay, do we see Dr. Jason yet?
No, we do not.
No, we do not. Jason, I'm going to tell you this just kind of we learned last time when we brought you on. You may have to rejoin, so come off of my page if you're on my page, and then come back onto it, and then you'll be able to be invited. That's what we learned last time. That's why we brought Dr. Jason on. Look, I'm going to tell you, make sure you share these videos. Oh, I'm going to repeat this again and again. Go back if you're new because we had a ton of newbies coming in. Go back and watch the videos, the past 3 videos, because you need to understand this information to maximize your results in the fast for June 10th through the 14th. Our goal is to fast over 10,000 people. And again, always check with your doctor. That's very important. If you're on medications, please don't stop. Check with your doctor. Isaac, do we see Dr. Fung? You'd probably be telling me that. Scroll through. Do you see other people that say invite?
Yeah.
Okay.
Susan Calabro Monias, Chelsea, Frank Hauser.
Oh, Chelsea. Chelsea's Cheesecake. Frankenhauser. Gosh, back in Pittsburgh, Chelsea. Welcome. Glad you're. Gosh, how many years ago was that? If you see this, the cellular healing diet, the cellular, I can't remember, right? Cellular healing diet book, the Chelsea's Cheesecake. There's Chelsea. She actually made that cheesecake. The best. Anyways, so I'm going to repeat this again because we have new people joining. So how many people do we have right now, Isaac?
51.
Okay, so we're going to keep getting more, but this is important that we watch the videos from before you get to this point. And another important fact, tomorrow night I'm going to be teaching on the feast-famine cycling. Again, really important concept. So be here Thursday night, tomorrow. That's 6 Mountain Standard Time. That's 8 Eastern Time. That'd be 5 Pacific time. I'm not going to go through Europe, although we do have a lot of people here from all over the world that watch these, and so you're going to have to figure that out on your own, but I'm sure you're used to this time. So, all right, hopefully we can bring Dr. Fung on here. Otherwise, I just got to keep telling you to, to do these things, share, watch the videos, be at the seminar. We have a lot of doctors watching this. The seminar November 2nd through the 4th this year. So, all right, Dr. Fung coming on yet?
No, where is he?
All right, well, if he texts, well, yeah, before Warren was here, so I gave him Warren's number to text. But I know Warren's watching. Warren should be. He is watching? Uh-huh. Okay, so Warren can text Dr.
He's
Fung.
online now.
All right, perfect. Invite him. All right, that was not so bad. Split screen, man, technology. You got to have a young kid here just to make yourself feel a little secure.
How do I invite him now?
Just hit invite. There should be right next to his name, invite.
I'm clicking on his profile.
It should be right next to his name, invite. Well, see, it helps to have a young kid at the Facebook. They don't use Facebook anymore, man.
I only see 3 people.
And did it say invite next to it?
Yeah.
So, Jason, I think what you have to do, according to Warren, is go off and then come back in, and then it'll have the invite word. If you are already on, then for whatever reason, I don't get the technology, you can't be invited. You have to join again. So try that. One of the topics that we're going to discuss tomorrow evening is this concept of feast-famine. When I had, I looked at some of Jason's work in the past, and he talked about the benefits of fasting, intermittent fasting. Jason's a big believer in this. But he talked about throwing these days in weekly, especially for metabolically challenged people like diabetics, because what it does is it does get rid of the glucose. It makes the body get rid of the fat that's basically accumulating in the organs. And we're going to learn tomorrow night. Dr. Jason?
It says it's adding.
Okay. He's going to be on in a second. Okay. All right, Jason, when you
Still adding?
All right, still adding. All right.
No answer from the live video.
Really?
Okay, I'll try him again.
How's my connection? You never know about these connections. They come, they go. Well, we are giving it a minute. Be patient, folks.
There we go.
Hey, I can hear you.
Hey, are you there?
It's amazing. Jason, after the last one, you said something very funny because I was thinking the same thing. Yeah, Doc, I'm just amazed that it actually worked. And every time I have these apprehensions as I'm sitting here waiting. So it worked again. Come on. All right.
Pretty amazing. The technology is amazing, but I'm always like, I don't think I'm going to get this working for me.
Yeah, Jason, there's more of a stereotype being Asian, man. People expect you to know technology. Me, I just have to tell them my age. There's no expectation to learn technology. I don't want it. I hate it. Thanks for joining us, and welcome to Fasting for a Purpose, Jason. We have so many people here who are learning about the art and the science of fasting. And I loved your book. Many of my clients and doctors and their patients love your book, The Complete Guide to Fasting, and the Obesity Code. And I'm sure you're working on something new. But look, we promised that we were going to talk about some of these myths around fasting, because many people, I'm sure, are watching this saying, hey, I can't wait to fast, but I've heard you can lose muscle. I heard you can gain your weight back. It's a yo-yo diet. I heard. So talk about some of the myths, Dr. Jason.
Yeah, so probably the biggest one that's out there, there's several actually. There's one that says you're going to burn muscle. And this is probably, it's funny because all of these myths are actually quite untrue, and it's actually the opposite. So the reason people say this is that when you fast, you rely on your body's own stores of energy. So there's two sort of main stores of energy. There's glycogen in the liver, and that lasts about 24 hours before it's depleted. So when it's depleted, you have to go to something else. So between 24 and 36 hours, you do something called gluconeogenesis, where you use protein and you turn that into glucose for the body before fat burning really starts to really ramp up. After about 36 hours, you see ketone bodies being produced, and the body has mostly switched over to fatty acids. So almost every tissue in the body, except the brain, so your liver, your heart, your lungs, your muscles, can burn fatty acids. So you can take the fat molecule and you can just burn it directly, so your muscles can burn fat. The brain can't do that because the triglycerides can't go past the blood-brain barrier, so you produce ketone bodies instead. But there's this short window between 24 and 36 hours where you rely on gluconeogenesis, which is protein breakdown. And everybody says, wow, you're burning muscle. And the thing is that you're not burning muscle, you're burning protein, first of all. And second of all, there's an assumption that that's all going to be very bad. It's actually not, because if you are
really good,
you actually have way more protein than somebody who's lean. So it's estimated that you have somewhere between 20 and 50% more protein than somebody who is actually lean. So you actually have to get rid of that. And that's all that connective tissue, that's all the skin and so on. And that's one of the reasons we think, like we have no proof, but we think that we actually have never sent anybody for skin removal surgery, because the body actually metabolizes that protein. And it's a good thing. So we talk about autophagy, which is this new process where you're actually breaking down protein. And you might think, oh, how is breaking down protein good? Because you're just going to burn muscle. And that's where the fallacy lies, because what you also do is your body ramps up growth hormone. So when you start to eat again, your growth hormone actually builds back. So you're actually renovating your whole body's protein. So you're breaking down proteins, but then when you eat again, you are going to rebuild new ones. So you got rid of the old junky ones and you put in new ones, which is way better than leaving in your old junky ones. In fact, it's thought to be so powerful that it may have a role in preventing cancer, for example, preventing Alzheimer's disease, which is this sort of buildup of junky proteins in your brains, which clogs everything up. And also it's, it's sort of this anti-aging idea, because you're sort of renewing yourself, rejuvenating these proteins as opposed to keeping the old ones there. So if you look at the way the body renews itself, you have to break down first. So if you look at bones, for example, you use osteoclasts to break down bone before you rebuild new ones. Yeah, exactly. And you have to do that, because if you want to renovate your bathroom, for example, the first thing you have to do is rip out that avocado green tub from the 70s, right? If you leave that in, you can't put in your nice new, clawfoot tub or whatever you want to put in. So the first part of renewal is actually breaking down, and that's what you're activating here. So if you look at studies of intermittent fasting, and there's been 3 or 4 now, and you measure lean mass versus fat mass, what you find is that fat mass goes down, and if you compare calorie restriction versus intermittent fasting. But if you look at the percentage of lean mass, because you're losing fat, the lean mass goes up in both. But the intermittent fasting group actually turns out almost 4 times better at preserving lean mass because of this growth hormone. So if you simply look at the breakdown cycle, then you'd say, wow, you're going to break down all your muscles. And in order to think that, you'd have to believe that our body is really just so stupid that we're going to store energy as body fat, but when we need it, oh, hey, we'll burn the protein. It's like, why would our body do that? Like, if you thought that, then all those Aboriginals, those Native Americans, Native Canadians, those Inuit, who go through these repeated feast-famine cycles should be nothing but little balls of fat. But they weren't. They were lean, they were strong, and there was no problem. So all the studies show that, in fact, intermittent fasting preserves lean mass at least equally, but almost all studies show that it preserves it better than if you do simple calorie restriction. So it's very ironic that the calorie restriction people say that, oh, don't ever miss a meal, don't do the fasting, you're going to break down protein, when in fact what breaks down or what preserves the lean mass is the intermittent fasting with this growth hormone. So it's a really sort of interesting sort of myth, because it's actually the exact opposite.
Well, when you look at some of those studies on caloric restriction, they're shorter term. When you take caloric restriction long term is really where the failures begin, because the body starts to think it's starving, and then bad things start to happen. It will hold on to its fat at all costs, and the metabolism in that case does get lower and lower to body's trying to save its life, right? So, all right, so talk about that, because that's another myth about fasting is that, okay, this is a yo-yo diet, or, this is something that people are going to lose weight, then they're going to gain more weight back after. I can tell you from clinical experience, that simply doesn't happen, Jason. Why?
Yeah, and again, very good reasons why that is. First of all, it always appears that way if you do longer fasts, because what you have to understand is that there's only a half a pound of fat loss per day of fasting. So a pound of fat is roughly 3,500 calories. If you burn 1,800 in a day, you're talking about roughly half a pound of body fat, and that's it. So you do 4 days of fasting, you're only going to lose 2 pounds of body fat. You're going to lose more than that. You're going to lose 5 pounds, and the rest of that is water. So after 4 days, you might lose 5 pounds. You say, oh, wow, that's amazing. Then you start to eat again. All that water weight sort of comes back on, and you regain 3 pounds. And then you say, oh, look at that. It was a waste of time. But it wasn't a waste of time. You actually are expected to only lose 2 pounds. And it's always a lot less than people think. So that's where some of this myth about the yo-yo, it's a waste of time,
Right,
sort of thing comes in. Because people don't understand actually how little body fat, body fat is a very efficient method of storing calories, and that's why it's only a half a pound per day. So when you talk about body metabolism, in fact, again, it's very interesting, because if you look at intermittent fasting, all the studies show that it's actually much better at preserving metabolic rate. So metabolic rate is the number of calories that you burn in a day outside of exercise. So that's to keep your lungs working, your liver working, your kidneys working, and all that sort of thing. So you can measure it in terms of the number of calories per day.
right.
If you put somebody on a fast for 4 days, nothing to eat for 4 days, and measure their basal metabolic rate at the end of those 4 days, it's actually 10% higher than when you start. And again, there's a good reason for that. We understand fully the reasons for that, because when you don't eat, insulin falls, but everybody forgets that there's a counter-regulatory hormone surge. So the counter-regulatory hormones they run counter to insulin. So as insulin falls, these go up. And those hormones are, one is growth hormone that we talked about. The other one is noradrenaline and sympathetic tone. So sympathetic tone is in fact the sort of fight or flight response, and actually increases the amount of energy that your body is expending. So in fact, that is actually going to keep your metabolic rate running high. And we might ask, why would the body do that? It's like, okay, think about it from a survival standpoint. You're a caveman.
Always.
It's winter. There's no food. So if you don't eat and your body starts to shut down, you're going to have even more trouble going out there and getting food, because you're tired, you're hungry, and you can't think, right? That's what everybody thinks when you fast.
Right.
After another day of no food, it's going to get worse and worse and worse. It's a downward spiral. It gets harder and harder every single day. You're going to die. We wouldn't all be here if that was the case. So again, the body's just not that stupid. So what it does instead is it switches fuel sources. So we switch from burning food to burning body fat, which is in fact just stored food energy. It's why you have body fat. Body fat is not there for looks. It's there because it's stored food from, a month ago, a year ago, whatever it is. So let your body use it. But at the same time, as it switches the fuel, it says, whoa, there's tons of this stuff, let's burn it. But second of all, I need to give the body energy, because I need you to go out and hunt some woolly mammoth so that I can eat again. So that's a survival mechanism, and that's why our body doesn't actually slow down when we fast. It actually ramps up. And that's very interesting, because if you look, and this has great implications when we're talking about performance athletics. So there's a part of our company, the Intensive Dietary Management Program, that's starting to work with a lot of sort of professional level athletes. Because if you think about it, this is something that you can actually harness in a way to sort of hack your body to better performance. How? What you do is you fast and you train in the fasted state. So there's all kinds of research into this. If you don't eat for a period of time, say 18, 20 hours, well, what's going to happen is that your noradrenaline is going to go up. You're going to activate your fight or flight response. Now, you actually have more energy than you had before. So if you're a professional pitcher or some sort of professional fighter, you want that edge because the difference between winning and losing is millimeters. And that's it. So we have all these baseball players we work with. It's millimeters, it's inches, the game of inches, right? And 1 inch this way or that way is the difference between being in the minor leagues and signing a $10 million contract. So they want that edge.
I always say, look, one of the best ways to optimize your hormones is exercise in that intermittent fasted state, because your growth hormone rises. You're taking advantage of that. It's not what happens when you exercise. It's really to get that edge. It's what happens after. It's that adaptation that occurs to the growth hormone, the norepinephrine, all of that, what you're talking about, really makes you recover. And recovery with exercise is really the magic. I call this, because you're saying something that I love talking about. Everything is about adaptation. The body adapts to survive. So what happens is, to adapt, we optimize our hormones. The body optimizes the hormones. So it's hormone optimization via adaptation. And really that's what you're talking about here, is when we're in the fasting state, we're getting this hormone optimization to survive. But we can take advantage of that. It becomes a biohack, if you will.
Yeah, absolutely. So, for performance, you want to train in the fasted state, you want to fight in the fasted state, or play in the fasted state. Then afterwards, you can eat and let your body utilize that growth hormone, so you train harder and recover faster. And that's a huge edge. And if you think about it, you think about if you're out there and on the, whether it's the baseball diamond or the UFC or whatever it is, like, do you want to be the hungry wolf? Or do you want to be that lion that just ate, right? The one that's yawning and sleeping and stuff, right? Who would you rather be? The wolf. It's like, I'd rather be the wolf, the hungry wolf. That's part of its power. And it's like, that's so obvious when you sort of put it in, and we know the physiology. And the whole thing is, you're absolutely right. It's all about the body's adaptations. And yet we think our body is so stupid that we have to shove muffins in our mouth every 2 hours. It's like, oh yeah, you got to wake up every 2 hours and stick a muffin in your mouth, otherwise you're going to die. It's like, no, we survived.
Well, I think that brings up another myth. And I want to say this too before we go. If we're fasting someone for 5 days, I can exercise during that time. My son was exercising twice a day through that. No problem at all. Matter of fact, he probably optimized even more. Many people watching health challenges, you're probably better off just resting until you get a little more metabolically efficient. So just so caution. But in an intermittent fasting state, Jason, that's where we start. That's the best place to start. A place to start for people is, if they skip breakfast, exercise in the morning, right?
Absolutely. So if you sort of you take advantage of the nighttime, because you're getting that sort of 8 hours of sleep, so you're getting sort of 8 hours of fasting sort of right off the bat. Then if you like to train in the morning, don't eat until you train, and then you train in the fasted state, then you eat. And that's sort of the most optimal sort of way to go.
You could do the opposite. You could eat in the morning and fast later too, which
absolutely
might even be better for some people.
Yeah, if you look at the circadian rhythm, I think actually the best time to eat is not late at night. I think if you look at the insulin effect, so
especially for weight loss.
Yeah, for weight loss, specifically for weight loss. It's all about insulin. So insulin is the major hormone that tells our body to store fat. So if you take the same meal and you eat it in the morning versus eating it late at night, there's actually a different insulin effect, which means that eating it in the morning is actually less fattening than eating it late at night. So the optimum time, I think, is actually to eat somewhere in the midday as your main meal. The reason we don't is that our work-life schedule rarely lets you do that. So my kids are at school, I'm at work.
The Europeans have it right. I mean, they kind of eat that big meal, like right there in the middle of the afternoon. Yeah. Let's talk about another myth, and it's going to lead me into my glucose question. But there is another myth, and you kind of covered it already. But I don't want to fast because I'm worried about being nutrient deficient or protein deficient. You already answered that, which the body's smart enough to eat up the bad protein and the bad stuff first, and it does that and gets its amino acids via eating the bad stuff, that autophagy work. But what about your nutrients? Aren't you going to be nutrient deficient if you fast?
Yeah, I mean, if you're really worried about that, then you can always take a multivitamin. And we say, well, if, a general multivitamin will give you most of what you need. Um, that sort of depends on what you eat when you do eat. So if you're trying to lose weight, it's not a nutrient deficiency problem, right? So you have to be uh, clear. Like if you have scurvy, for example, you're vitamin C deficient, you take vitamin C, it gets better. Obesity is not that. Everybody tries to make it a nutrient deficiency disease, but it's generally, most people are well nourished if you're eating. Like you have to look at some of these old historical texts. So the people who survived through um, the prison, being a Japanese prisoner of war in World War II and concentration camps. Like, even if you look back at the rationing in England in World War II, it was incredible. Like, if you look at the amount of food that they ate, the rations were, I looked at it one time, in a week, you got like 3 slices of bacon or something like that. It was something ridiculous. I mean, it's like the amount that my son eats in like a day, sort of thing. And they were all fine. So the body can conserve all those nutrients. So remember
Of
that
course.
for adults, if you have protein needs, your body will break down those old proteins and scavenge them and make them into new proteins. So the actual amount of protein that you can survive on is fantastically low. It's virtually zero because the body is not really growing. It may not be.
I will say, some people may get some mineral depletion in the beginning because they're losing so much glycogen and water. And so we recommend doing a little sea salt. You can take some
Yeah,
magnesium if you want. You
magnesium
mentioned
and
that.
salt is the main ones. But if you talk about nutrients, I mean, if as long as you eat well, when you do eat well, you're going to eat plenty of what you need. You want to get rid of the stuff that's a bunch of calories but no nutrients, like the sugar and the white bread, and that's all carbohydrates. Remember, carbohydrates are largely just energy. So there's not much nutrition in there as opposed to say beef or liver or something like that where there's a ton of sort of micronutrients in it. So
Yeah.
if you're getting rid of that, I mean that's the optimal. If you're trying to lose weight, that's the optimal is to do the fasting, and then when you eat very sort of nutritiously. Make sure you're eating whole, unprocessed foods. Lots of nutritious foods.
Now, working with diabetics, which you work a lot with in pre-diabetes, you talk about the importance about bringing down glucose, right? And many people are going to see during the fast that their glucose isn't dropping. Or many people even watching this at intermittent fast are going to say, my glucose is still 100 or above. It's not getting low. And you talk about the importance of getting glucose low. And you talk about a different theory even about diabetes and how the body pushes glucose into the organs. And that could be part of the problem. Talk about that.
Yeah, so that's very interesting thing. We see this a lot actually. For type 2 diabetes, we put a lot of people on intermittent fasting through our IDM program. And most people see that their blood sugars go down. But once in a while, somebody says, whoa, my blood sugar went up. And it's actually a phenomenon known as the dawn phenomenon. So these counter-regulatory hormones we talked about earlier, they actually push glucose into the blood. So they take it out of the liver and push it into the blood. Remember, this is a normal phenomenon because if you have sort of insulin falling and growth hormone going up, the body senses that there's no glucose, so it's got to bring the glucose back out from the body. So some people get worried because they go on a fast and their blood glucose actually goes up. Assuming that the medications aren't changing and so on, they're like, why? How can this be? And it's like, well, it's because your body's actually taking it from the inside and just pushing it out into the blood. Because you've got to ask yourself this question. If you didn't eat, where did that glucose come from? Where did that blood glucose that's high come from?
Yeah, it couldn't be from the muscle that quickly, so it was dumping it from somewhere.
Yeah, exactly. It was dumped from your own body, from your liver predominantly, and also from breakdown of fatty acids. So the glycerol backbone can be turned into glucose, and the protein can be turned into glucose. So there's all these different ways that your body can store glucose, and it's actually pushing it out. So is it a bad thing?
But if it isn't that the point? If it pushes it out, then it actually then can start getting the fat out of the organs.
Exactly, and that's exactly what we say. We say, look, think about it for a second. If you're not eating, where's that glucose coming from? It's coming from your own body. It's trying to push it out in the blood, so now you can go and burn it. If you get worried and start eating, all that sugar is just going to go back into your body to come out at a different time. And that's not good, because then you're going to have to take medication to kind of keep it bottled up inside, where it's going to do all this damage to your organs.
Yeah. And what we notice when we fast people is that each fast, their glucoses get lower, 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 lower as an indication that their body is getting rid of all that extra stored glucose, and now it starts to be able to burn the fat out of the pancreas and the liver, which is a big problem, right? You can be skinny and have this fatty organs, and it's more dangerous.
Yeah, so in fact, that's probably the key part of type 2 diabetes, is the fat, not the overall fat. It's actually the fat that's within the liver, within the pancreas. All that fat that you carry around the midsection, far more dangerous than the fat you carry sort of underneath the skin. And that's why, if you look at the definition of the metabolic syndrome, which is one of these constellation of symptoms like high blood glucose and high blood pressure, but there's no weight category. So if you look at metabolic syndrome, it's actually the waist circumference. The waist circumference is actually a far better indicator of your risk, future heart attack risk, than your body mass index, which is what we all think about when we talk about people being overweight. But from a risk standpoint, it's actually the waist circumference, not the body weight or the body mass index that we look at. So, and that's the reason. It's because it's actually the weight, it's the fat around the midsection. That's the really important stuff.
Yeah, so we see sometimes in these extended fasts, people's glucose will rise, and it starts to trim down, but then on their intermittent fasting, they start to see lower glucoses, because again, the fasting, and I know you believe it's really difficult to fix these diabetic cases without fasting. I mean, that's the point where we start adding in fasting days of the week. And Jason, I read probably your stuff some years ago on that, and we started doing that clinically, where we started picking 1, 2, 3 days a week and fasting people, especially these metabolically challenged people. And I'll tell you, the magic happens, because according to you and others, that's really the only way you're going to get that fat out of those organs and really get that glucose down.
Yeah, because it's been building up over decades usually. So people who are getting to that stage where they're developing type 2 diabetes, often they're middle-aged or older, and they all grew up in the sort of low-fat era where everybody was carb loading and eating rice cakes and that sort of thing, and sugar was just fine. So they all grew up in that era where they were told to eat very low fat, eating lots of big plates of pasta was really healthy for you. So that's what they did. And unfortunately, they all got all this sugar overload. And so you got to work it out of their system. But we can't take 20 years to get it out of their system. So that's the problem. So that's why we have to rush it, because if I take 20 years, they're going to get all these complications of their organs before we get that diabetes down. So there's a bit of a rush on it. So that's why the fasting is so powerful. I always say it's really the ultimate, because you really can't go lower than 0. So if fasting doesn't work, like nothing is going to work, truthfully.
Yeah, I can tell you, we get so many people, most people are metabolically challenged today in some way. And again, even if you're not obese, most people have fatty organs, and that's leading to other age-related diseases. But I can tell you, without these fasting strategies, forget it. We would never be able to help people. Is there another myth that you feel we absolutely need to bust?
Yeah, I mean, there's really a lot. And the other one I would say is the myth that you sort of can't concentrate, or I have to work, so, I can't fast because I have to, I do computer work or something like that. And it's, again, just not true, because if you look at studies of concentration, so studies of memory, studies of everything, when you fast rats or when you fast humans, it's the same. Performance goes up. And it's the same reason. Everybody knows this.
Wow.
Because if you eat a big Thanksgiving meal, you're not really, really sharp. You just want to lie on the couch and watch some football. That's all you're good for. But if you haven't eaten, these hormones kind of kick in, and your mental, sharpness goes way up, and everybody sort of notices it. So you have these groups in Silicon Valley, for example, where intermittent fasting is like the biggest trend out there. It's huge out there. They have a group out there where they do all fasting all together, And, you know, it's like 10,000 people or something like that. It's a huge group. And the thing is that they're not doing it. They're all like these 20-year-old skinny programmers, right? And they're not doing it because they want to lose weight. They don't. They're doing it because they know that this is giving, it's another biohack. They're giving themselves that mental edge because the difference between, you know, it's just like performance sports, but this is, you know, high stakes, you know, company building, right? The difference, you're a little smarter. It's the difference between being Facebook and being MySpace, right? On the one, it's only a little bit, and you're going to get creamed and be gone, or you could be a billionaire, right? And so they're going to give themselves every edge, and they'll take it. It's free. It's healthy anyway, so why not do it?
Yeah, they look at it as the biohack for the brain. And it's true. Look, my busiest days, you and I have talked about this, right? I don't plan typically on my fast days. They just kind of happen, right? Because I forget to eat. I'm busy. I'm going. In my brain, I need it sharp as can be. Those are my fasting days. Matter of fact, I just ate my first meal right before this, and I just never came up for air, man. I was just going.
There's one time, I'll tell you,
yeah,
I'm doing the audiobook for the diabetes code. And so I just wanted to get it done. You know, an audiobook is a pain in the ass. It's like 6-7 hours straight in the chair with a microphone in this sort of 8-foot booth. And the funniest thing, so I'm like, okay, I'm just going to plow right through. I'm not going to eat breakfast. I'm not going to eat lunch because I want to be sharp. I want to get through this. And it's like 5 days, like 7-8 hours in the booth, right? So then I didn't do it. I didn't eat, and my stomach kept rumbling. You could hear it on there. So I had to go eat all the time. I was like, this is terrible. You know, I can't concentrate, but I have to eat because otherwise my stomach noises kept getting picked up. It's very funny.
Yeah, no, it does free up the mind, man. Your focus really does get through the word. Well, listen, Dr. Fung, you're going to be on. We're going to bring you back on during the fast, because during the fast, we're actually doing a video every night at this same time. And you're going to come back on, and we're going to, you know, go through some more questions. What I'll do is I'll gather up, and my team will gather up some of the questions that people have, and we'll fire some off you, and we'll make it usable. So listen, November 2nd through the 4th, doctors watching this, Dr. Jason will be with us in Las Vegas. So join us. My team will put a link there somehow, docs, if you want to sign up for the seminar. I'm sure they have some type of pre-deal. But Jason, we'll make sure, and also we'll get Jason. When's the diabetes code coming out?
Oh, it was released about a month ago, so that's out now.
And well, we'll add a link. Let's add a link. My team will add a link for that, so you can get Jason's brand new book. I didn't even read that one yet, embarrassingly. Your team better send me that. So
I don't know why. I'll ask them to send you one right away.
All right. I don't want to put you on the spot, but I love your work and what you're doing. And, you know, we've got a group of doctors applying a lot of that work. So thanks for coming on. We'll bring you back on, and look in the notes, guys. The team will make sure we get everything there. So Jason, appreciate you taking time out of your busy day. I know you got little kids there and a wife and all that. So thank you.
All right. Take care. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Bye-bye.